Blessings BookTube. This is a Tag Tuesday, another music tag called The Band book tag by Genteel Black Hole over there, Allie's channel. Happy birthday, Allie. And I was tagged by the wonderful, effervescent Phillip Hall. And there are 11 prompts. Each has to do with a band. The first is the Cardiacs. These first 5 I don't really know as well, and the bottom 5 I know better. So the Cardiacs, to me, sounds like a prog punk band. I'm not a fan of punk. There are maybe a few of the old guard, like the Pogues, that I care for, and I can sort of get on board with the milder forms of like Green Day. The prompt says to choose a book close to my heart, or a book with a flower on the cover, bonus for daisies. All right, so I'm going to talk about the corpus of Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh was significant to me as a young boy, being torn between the States and Britain. Having been raised on Now We Are Six, my Pooh was very much British. Nonetheless, I was confronted in school with these very yellow Poohs of the Disney books and the golden books and whatnot. And when eventually my mother tried to go to work for Disney, she took us to Disneyland. I ended up with a little stuffed Pooh who was also the American Pooh. Here's a little bit of punk for you. That Pooh ended up getting his foot burned off on our hot plate. We were tossing him about, and I don't know if the hot plate was on for warmth or what. We were very poor. And his foot landed on it and burned, and he lost a lot of his stuffing. So he always had to sort of slump after that. We stuffed him up with some napkins and made a napkin, bandage for his poor little foot. But anyway, at some point I made a tiny photo album for Pooh. Not just Pooh, but like all the stuffed animals. And there was like the koala who was like Anzac. And they were all the pictures, they were just like wounded soldiers with like bandages and, eye patches and from the war, right? So very British. So my Pooh's leg apparently was a war wound. Anyway, this was all settled for me years later when I read The Tao of Pooh, which I've been working up to here. So The Tao of Pooh sort of reconciles the opposites for me, right? This non-dualistic thinking of Taoism. And anyway, that's an Asian Pooh, I guess, if anything, right? So that's how Winnie the Pooh is close to my heart. All right. The second band is XTC. I have to admit that when I read this, I read it of the band TLC, who were a ladies rap band of the 90s. Well past the 90s, but that I knew very much in the 90s when videos were still a thing. They had the Ain't Too Proud to Beg video, which I loved. And I just really loved their energy. And you're going to see that I like some very different kinds of music. I'm not one of those who says I like all music. I do not care for opera and twangy country and a lot of other kinds, and gangster rap especially. But back in those early halcyon days of early rap with the Fat Boys, I really like TLC, so I misread that one. So I was listening to some TLC when I was answering this question, and the prompt was a book that brings you joy, or a book written or set near where you live. I'm going to go with the setting one because in 2 days from hence, on Thursday for Poetry Thursday, I'll be putting out the second section of my Thai literature and introduction video. So that's going to be my answer for literature set in Thailand, where I'm currently residing. So you can look forward to that on Thursday. Okay. Now, the next one is Thelonious Monk, and I'm very much on board with that. Jazz is by far my favorite form of music. This one is to come up with a character with a distinctive name or hat. And I went with, I torture myself sometimes to think of past the obvious answers for some of these things. forgetting that for many people might not know the answers that are sort of obvious to people with my background or age or whatever reading tradition. So anyway, there's a character in Sheridan's Rivals called Mrs. Malaprop, and it's from where we get the expression malapropisms, which is when you misspeak. So, for example, calling Mrs. Malaprop the very pineapple of politeness for pinnacle. So that's who I'm choosing for this one. Not overthinking it. 4 is Ryan Watt, who I had never heard of before. He seemed to do some covers. So I saw him do Strange Fruit, and a couple other covers. So for this, I was thinking of like a cover and also Strange Fruit. Put me in mind of antebellum literature. So Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. In the Gullah Islands would be my answer for that one. Next is Ivor Cutler, who I'd also never heard of, but plays this organ and sort of has very simple lyrics, which put me very much in mind of kirtan music. Kirtan music being the Sikh or Hindu devotional music for chanting with the harmonium, tabla. And so for that, put me in mind of bhakti poetry. There's the Theravaran hymns of the Tamil saints in a book called Poems of Shiva. There's Speaking of Shiva is a Penguin classic as well. And neither of those is the book that I really wanted to recommend, but I cannot for the life of me find it or remember the title. But it was taught to me when I was in the Graduate Theological Union at Berkeley by my Jesuit teacher, who was a Jesuit but also a total bhakti and Shivite. His teacher, was a Shiva devotee. Hinduism, as you may know, is more henotheism than pantheism. That is to say, there are many gods, but very often someone will have their principal god that they worship. So Shiva in the south, or Krishna, Rama, the various forms. So Shiva poetry, beautiful. So get a book of those; you'll enjoy them for sure. Okay. Now the bad plus was the discovery of the bunch. So of all these bands, probably the only one I'll listen to going forward that I discovered today is Bad Plus. They're jazz fusion, and I quite like them. The prompt is a book that is a retelling of an older story, or a book with a mathematical term or number in its title. And so for this one, I listened to them do Comfortably Numb and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And this put me very much back in the high school space. And in the high school space, we were made to read, sadistic adolescents like Separate Peace and, Lord of the Flies. And I would suggest some alternatives to that. Golding, if you want to read Golding, has some great stuff. The Spire, Pincher Martin is psychedelic. And then if you want high school sort of adolescent literature, I think Hermann Hesse is amazing. Not just Demian, but he wrote Peter Kammersind. It's another beautiful one that I love of his. And he could also work for the Friends one, which is coming up. So that's my reshaping of the high school curriculum, my retelling of the older story. Okay, Shudder to Think. Now this band to me sounded like sort of hard emo. This is for a book that scared you, or a thought-provoking book. Well, when I was listening to them, the algorithm went on from them to the Lisa Loeb song from Reality Bites, which is the film of Generation X. So that put me in the frame of mind of the book Generation X, which I often recommend, or I've often mentioned. So let me recommend another one that's similar, which is Klosterman's Sex, Drugs, and Cocoa Puffs. Also a fun read. And the horror, the trouble terror thing from back then, wasn't really a book, it was a movie. It was called The Day After. It was about nuclear holocaust. But of all the books that they listed for Gen X, a lot just really didn't resonate with me. AI, you just don't get us Gen X's. But I guess going along with that genocide, I would put Ender's Game. Ender's Game would be a sort of formative Gen X novel that sort of goes along with that theme of horror. And emo. Next is we're getting into the bands that I know. Björk, Kinks, Beatles, Mount Up. Okay, Björk, I'm not a huge fan of, but I know her. This is Nordic literature, a book by a Nordic author or with an icy or wintry setting. So for this one, and for those of you who liked my recent tier ranking video, which I think a lot of people like, I did an earlier tier ranking of the early Nobel winners. A lot of plays, a lot of great stuff, and a lot of the early Nobels were Nordic. So Bjornson, you've got Lagerlof with The Adventures of Nils. And I'm going to recommend for this one Sigrid Undset's trilogy, sort of fantasy trilogy called Kristen Lavins' Daughter. That's a lot of fun. I think you'll enjoy that one for a Nordic author who's a little bit older, but very in the flavor of today, or vibe, I guess the kids are saying, in the vibe of today's fantasy trilogy stuff. Okay, next the Kinks. Almost got to see the Kinks when they played at Binghamton. Binghamton, for some reason, little university in downstate New York, got a lot of amazing sort of ska bands. The Wailers, Toasters, Mephistopheles. By the way, the Kinks played our campus, and I also missed 10,000 Maniacs. But anyway, and there was a fire, so I guess I'm kind of glad I missed it. But no one was hurt, so it's all right. So the Kinks, this is funny, made me think with the Pogues of my favorite anti-Christmas music. If you ever get tired of Christmas music at Christmas, look for the Pogues in the drunk tank, and the Kinks have Father Christmas, give us your money. Ain't got no time for your silly toys. So this prompt is a book about siblings or written by siblings. For this, I chose Genesis, another great band of my era, which is all about, Cain and Abel, Joseph and his brothers, Jacob versus Esau. All of this sibling rivalry is just part and parcel and such a major theme of our Judeo-Christian Abrahamic tradition. And you can find that in a modern novel very much in East of Eden, which some would call the great American novel. So read East of Eden for some of that biblical sibling rivalry working itself out. Next is the Beatles. And for this one, it's a book that a parent or a relative introduced me to, or a book that I've loved for a long, long, long time. In my very earliest videos, if you go and click on videos, there's a way that you can click on the oldest videos instead of showing you the newest. You'll see one I did about my mother's shelf in her bathroom, which is all the formative books of her youth in England, sort of the lake poets, and in sort of hippiedom beat culture. So all of those, Krishnamurti, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, all those books. So I talked about all of them. The one I didn't talk about, circling again the theme that I've been getting towards a video coming up soon of New Mexico literature, I think. One that she had there that I loved was Frank Waters, he's non-native, but he seems to really have gotten some great access with some native, especially Hopis. He wrote the Book of the Hopi, or maybe exclusively Hopis, and other Puebloans, Tiwa, I'm not sure. but he wrote the Man Who Killed the Deer, for example. So sort of an outsider look on Native American literature that I found really interesting to go with, Black Elk Speaks and those other bunch, Castaneda's Don Juan books. All right, coming finally to Spinal Tap. These prompts go up to 11. So number 11 is Spinal Tap. Very clever. I see what you did there. This is to recommend a favorite song, album, or artist. I'm not going to pick just one favorite because I already picked a bunch. And I made a whole video about them, believe it or not, called These Go to 11. And so I'm going to provide a link down in the show notes to that. And you can go right from this to watching my These Go to 11 choices. So thanks for that fun prompt. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed listening to the music while I was trying to think of the choices. Some of the music I didn't enjoy, but put me in certain moods. And I haven't listened to a lot of that kind of music in a long time. It's always good to remind yourself of everything that's out there that people are listening to and how it affects us. So thanks again, Phillip Hall, for tagging me with that. And I'll tag some people down below as well to do this tag for you. Thank you. Bye.